I'm talking right now with County Attorney Fred Van Valkenburg. And Fred, first of all, I appreciate you being willing to meet with me like this. I know it's the last week that you're going to be County Attorney, and I appreciate the fact that you're willing to answer some questions about your tenure. As
I'm more than happy to do that, Peter, particularly with you. You've been a really good reporter, and I'd probably do most anything you asked.
well, let's be careful about that. You still have a week left in office. So, okay, my first question. I just looked at your bio, and you started off as you got your jurisprudence degree in 73, and then
Yes.
you went into the city attorney's office, and then you went into private practice, and then you went into the legislature. So, what was the reasoning why you decided to run for office after you've been in public service for a while?
Well, it goes back a little bit to why I decided to go to law school. I was a product of the 1960s, early 1970s. There was a lot of turmoil in the nation at the time. And from my point of view, a real need for people to step up and
Hold on just a minute.
engage in public service.
Okay, go ahead.
So, that's why I went to law school. When I graduated, I was fortunate enough to get a job in Missoula. Most of my classmates had to head off to other places, primarily Helena, but think places like Miles City and Williston and all that sort of thing. And I felt pretty good about that. Though was working in city court, handling 5 or 6 trials a day for things like speeding and dog at large and disturbing the peace and partner assaults and stuff like that. And it got to be difficult in some ways, and particularly in terms of a relationship with one judge. And so at that point I decided to leave, and I went into practice with Paul Smith and John Connor. And shortly after that, the fellow who taught us criminal law at the University of Montana Law School asked the 3 of us to take over the contract as public defenders in Missoula. So from 1975 through 1982, I was a contract public defender in Missoula and handled almost all of the public defender work.
So you were the guy at the jail.
I was the guy at the jail. I was the guy in the courtroom.
Wow.
It was quite a bit different system then than it is now. We figured out at one point that we were getting paid about 80 cents an hour for our time in that particular job. And one of the things that I decided after doing it for about 3 or 4 years, was that the state really needed a much better system for providing for defense of people who couldn't afford to hire an attorney. And that was the primary motivating reason that I decided to run for the legislature in 1978. There were a lot of other things that went on too, but that was what really kicked me in gear personally to run for the legislature.
Well, you spent a lot of time there.
I did. I was fortunate enough to get elected in 1978 and reelected quite a few times after that. And the longer I was there, the more I got opportunity to serve in the leadership. I was the majority leader in the Senate a couple of sessions, and the Democratic floor leader, and culminating in 1993 when I became the president of the Montana Senate. So I got lots of opportunity to learn a lot about Montana and its people.
All right. Now, you came back to Missoula, and what led to your decision to run for county attorney?
Well, I think that the legislature is just a part-time thing, and you do it 4 months every 2 years, and so you've got to do something else to make a living. Well, after serving a couple terms in the legislature, I had pretty much driven my private practice into the ground, and fortunately for me, I was fairly successful at the public defender work, to the point where Dusty Dayshaw, the county attorney back then, and Ed McLean, his chief deputy, decided they wanted to hire me as a deputy county attorney. So in 1985, I started work as a deputy county attorney. In 1989, Ed McLean got appointed to the district court bench, and so then I succeeded him as the chief criminal deputy county attorney. And then in 1998, Dusty Deshaw decided he had, after serving 28 years as county attorney, he was going to run for Congress, even though he was up for election as county attorney at the time. Well, that meant there was an opening for county attorney as a full-time job, and that's when I ran for county attorney in 1998 and got elected to that position.
So you've served 3 terms?
I've served 4.
4 terms.
4 4-year terms. So 16 years as the elected county attorney, and preceding that with 20 years as in the legislature. So I've had 36 years in elected office.
Let's talk about your tenure as county attorney. Are there any particular cases? I realize the last 2 years have been tumultuous, but as far as going back to you when you first became county attorney, any cases that really jump out as being really impactful in determining the way that you do your job?
Well, there's a lot of things that are impactful in the way you do your job. The things that I remember best are when we prosecuted a fellow by the name of James Martin for shooting and critically injuring Missoula police officer Bob Heinley. That case was transferred from Missoula to Butte for the trial, and we had the trial in Butte, and it was a very tense situation because we had a police officer who was paralyzed from the neck down. It was a very sad situation. The defendant claimed that it was essentially just sort of an accidental shooting because he was just trying to scare the officer by firing a gun and didn't really intend to hit him. But to me, it was pretty darn clear that he was trying to shoot the police officer, and he had, maybe it was a lucky shot, but he was certainly intending to shoot the police officer at the time. And Bob lived another 10, 12 years or so after that, but subsequently passed away, I think, primarily as a result of sort of the life that a quadriplegic or paraplegic, I think in his case, leads living in a wheelchair. It's very difficult and that.
Now, were the charges upgraded against Mr. Martin to homicide after that point?
No, because he had been charged with attempted homicide. He was convicted of attempted homicide, and he got such a lengthy sentence. I think it was 100 years and without parole. So there really wasn't anything that could be accomplished by charging him with homicide after he died, charging Martin with homicide.
Some questions that I had in the cases that I've personally been reporting on. One was Chance Geary, the young man who was walking with his girlfriend over by the jail. A woman, I guess a University of Montana employee, distracted driving case, jumped the curb, hit Mr. Geary, killed him. And there was a lot of basically microscopic views of things going on in the county attorney's office as why this woman wasn't charged with a major crime. You know, what was, and basically I understand that she was basically charged with a misdemeanor, is that correct?
She was charged with careless driving resulting in death, and that was in city court. The city attorney's office charged her, and she pled guilty to that offense, and she was sentenced in city court. You know, one of the things about this particular job is that you not only have to prosecute people, you have to make decisions whether to prosecute people, and sometimes those are as important as the decision to actually prosecute someone, because the state has tremendous power over someone's life and can have a huge impact on them, and you have to really be able to come forward and show the evidence that you have as a basis. In that particular case, some people wanted to see this woman charged with negligent homicide, a more serious offense than careless driving resulting in death. But the law requires that in a negligent homicide case, the state prove that there was gross negligence involved in a particular case. Usually that's done by showing that someone was under the influence of alcohol or drugs, or there was excessive speeding, something that amounts to more than just regular negligence, that you just goof up and don't do something right. And that wasn't present in that case, and that woman should have never been charged. I would be surprised if there were very many lawyers at all out there who would think that she should have been charged with negligent homicide, because I think that they understand that there was not a case involving negligent homicide, and it's only people who don't really understand the law who are thinking that something else should be done.
Exactly. All right. Now, you came to national prominence, and I will never forget the day. I was sitting about 6 feet from you when Thomas Perez came to town with his band of folks from the federal government, basically to accuse Missoula and the police department of the University of Montana and your office of not handling sexual assaults in an appropriate way. And after hearing all of the niceties coming from the mayor and from police chief and from Dr. Roy Sangstrom, you took to the podium and delivered what I consider to be basically a blistering, I don't want to say attack, but basically a blistering defense of your own office. And for those who didn't have a chance to hear that, because I have it practically blazoned on my wall, you became my hero on that day. Could you just kind of go over the reasons why you were so upset at their appearance here in Missoula?
Well, I was upset because they were accusing our office of denying people their constitutional rights, and they had no evidence whatsoever to back that up. It was in hindsight, it was clearly a political game that they were playing to try and play to whatever crowd out there that they thought wanted to hear that particular message. It wasn't based on law whatsoever. And I was not going to, I guess, buy into that. I'm not going to criticize the mayor or the president of the university. They have a different role than I have to play. But I wasn't going to just let somebody accuse me and my staff of doing something as wrong as denying people constitutional rights, and without a vigorous defense, as you may describe it. And I'm probably more emotional than most people in terms of responding to things, and people aren't generally used to that because most politicians put on a very polished approach when they're talking to the media, and they don't want to offend anybody and whatnot. And I just don't feel that way. What you see with me is me, and not some PR version of what people think they ought to get out of a county attorney or any elected official.
And then it wasn't, I guess, a year after that or so, if I remember correctly, you were actually on vacation, and it was a Friday when the federal government dumped a 20-page document to the media, basically saying things that were egregiously offensive to you and to your staff about things that had gone on in the office regarding lack of prosecution of sexual assaults. And your response to that was also memorable.
Well, what led up to that, for people who may not remember, is that we had tried for almost, I would say, a year and a half to try and get the Department of Justice to give us any evidence to back up their original allegations that we were denying people constitutional rights. And they just essentially stonewalled us. They had nothing that they wanted to share with us in any way whatsoever. And so I decided that we were going to take them to court and try to get the federal courts to essentially say they had, first of all, no jurisdiction, and they had no evidence to rely on. And so finally, on February 11th, we filed our suit in federal court. 3 days later, on February 14th, they come out with this, what we call the Valentine's Day letter, in which they essentially lay out a whole bunch of anonymous allegations. And clearly what it was them being very unhappy that we had filed a lawsuit in federal court, and their very unfair approach to trying to prejudice the result with respect to that. It was the most unethical, unprofessional thing that I've ever seen in 40 years of the practice of law as to what they did on that particular day.
Now, eventually, Attorney General Fox stepped in and crafted some sort of an agreement where you dismissed the lawsuit and they stopped asking for records from your department. Are you satisfied with that agreement?
I'm satisfied with the agreement. I personally wish that I had been able to go on and have a federal judge make a decision in the case, but I think that the Attorney General was trying to kind of bring the matter to an end. He certainly has supervisory authority over me and could, if he wanted to, absolutely tell me that I had to do something. He never did that, but he did use some gentle persuasion to get me to go along. And at the same time, the county commissioners were throwing money at the Department of Justice out of fear that they might get sued in the whole thing. So I was getting squeezed on both ends, from the county commissioners with money on one side and from the Attorney General with authority on the other side. So I did what I think was the right thing to do and agreed to a settlement. I don't think it really gave the Department of Justice much at all, and I think it largely vindicated the county attorney's office as a result. But we got the case resolved, and we're moving on.
All right. Now, this may sound like a silly question, but as you look back on your career as a district attorney, did you ever come up with something that might be called the Van Valkenburg Doctrine, if there is such a thing?
No, I did not. I mean, I think what's really important here is that you're completely honest about what you do. You try to do the right thing. You try to do the ethical thing, and then, more importantly than anything else, is you try to hire good people and let those good people do their jobs without interference from management. I think that's largely what Dusty Dayshaw did when he was the county attorney. I think it clearly is what happened in my tenure as county attorney, and I think that's what serves the community the best.
All right, another question. As I look back over the years, it seems that Republicans don't seem to want to run for this office or run for the sheriff. And so basically, as what happened in this last race, the election is decided in the primary, which many people see that the less than 20 to 25% of the voters are deciding who's going to represent them in law enforcement, whether sheriff or county attorney. Do you think that, just as Fred Van Valkenburg, do you believe that this should be a nonpartisan office?
I do think it should be a nonpartisan office. I think the sheriff's position should be a nonpartisan office. I don't think there's anything that comes before the county attorney or the sheriff that really turns on any kind of a political policy issue at all. But that's a decision for the legislature to make and decide whether that should be the case. I think, we have a little bit of a unique situation in Missoula in that Republicans don't get elected to almost anything, and so it's not so different that they don't run for county attorney or sheriff and that. I mean, I did have a Republican opponent when I first ran in 1998, and I've seen certainly Republicans run for sheriff, but by and large they don't get elected because there seems to be a pretty strong support for the Democratic Party in Missoula County.
Getting back to the sexual assault situation, there were two trials, or actually two cases, Bo Donaldson and Jordan Johnson. One went to trial, one went to a plea. Were there any specific lessons that your office learned from either of those particular investigations?
Well, sexual assault cases are among the most difficult that you deal with in the job. And I think that particularly because of the sort of visibility of the University of Montana football program and subsequently the investigation by the Department of Justice and others into what was going on, there was a much higher visibility for these cases than there would have otherwise been. We deal with lots of cases that get no media attention whatsoever. But I think that the lesson, I guess, that we may have learned out of the whole thing here is how much more difficult it is to, and particularly going to trial, to get a jury to convict someone when there's all this media attention on the whole thing. And what happens is that we are somewhat hamstrung in terms of talking to the media, dealing with kind of what we would consider to be extrajudicial type things, whereas supporters of somebody who may be on trial don't feel those same compulsions. They don't feel like they have to not talk to the media, particularly if they're not attorneys. They can say anything they want, and they do, and that tends to influence potential jurors.
Now, one of the things too that you were particularly savaged by the media, you and your office were savaged by national media, press, CNN, New York Times, Huffington Post, you name it. You became a byword for the wrong way to do the job. And so I wanted to know how that affected you personally.
Well, it was very discouraging. I mean, I don't know what you mean exactly when you say the byword for the wrong way to do the job. Now, we were doing the job the right way. And the people that were making the stink were people that were trying to inject politics into a job of deciding, whether you have sufficient evidence to prosecute someone and how you ought to prosecute them. And that, I guess that just sort of comes with the job. You've got to have big shoulders and let it kind of bounce off of you and just take it. It's not always easy to do that, but you can't take it in a way that it sort of undermines your own confidence in what you're doing, and you change your decision because you don't want to be criticized. Being criticized is just something that you have to accept.
All right, one more question. Now, when you're done from here, when you leave the office after they have the big goodbye party for you, if they haven't already, what are your plans? Are you going to happily retire? Do you want to run for public office again? Maybe go back into private practice? Because you're not old, if I may say.
Well, I'm 66 years old. I've got I hope quite a few years ahead of me yet.
66 is the new 40.
Right. I hope I have quite a few years ahead of me. But what I want to do first and foremost is just kind of relax and get into sort of a depressurization mode here and not have to be doing interviews like this every day and having to answer up for things that I have no control over and things like that. I think that'll take 2-3 months at least to kind of just let my life settle down, get to know my wife a little bit more, and start enjoying just being alive and having the opportunity to do new things. And then I think I'll be able to make a decision. It's hard to imagine that I won't find some form of public service, but it may just involve teaching kids how to read at grade school, things like that, as opposed to going to the legislature and arguing with people. I'm spent in that regard.
Fred, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Peter. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you.